Have you ever experienced that gut punch moment when your message is met with nothing but digital silence? That void where a response should be, it communicates something profound, doesn't it? We often think of communication as words exchanged, but today I want to challenge that. That silence you're receiving, it's not an empty space. It's a message in itself, and learning how to decode it, and more importantly, how to respond to it, could transform every relationship in your life. Let's start with a fundamental truth. Communication is our bridge to other humans. But silence is also communication. It's not merely the absence of sound, it's a statement. Your task isn't to react to that silence with raw emotion. Your mission is to respond to it with intelligent strategy. The average person, when left on read, defaults to panic. They send a needy follow-up. Hey, did you get my last message? In that moment, they've performed a profound power transfer. They've broadcast, you're in control here, and I'm chasing you. But if you understand the deeper currents of human psychology and lean in here because this is crucial, you'll recognize that people are fundamentally moved by two forces, curiosity and uncertainty. When someone doesn't reply, the most effective follow-up isn't a lengthy justification. It's something concise, potent, something like, interesting, I didn't see that coming. Feel the weight of that? Just 5 words, but they detonate in the mind. Their brain immediately kicks into overdrive. What didn't they see coming? What did I miss? Did I miscalculate? This approach achieves 2 objectives instantly. First, it weaves a thread of mystery. Second, it completely inverts the power dynamic. Now they are the ones seeking clarity. They become the pursuer. But, and this is the essential caveat, this cannot be wielded as a mere manipulation trick. It works because it radiates self-respect. It declares, I value my time and energy. If you don't, that's your choice, but I won't audition for your attention. Think of communication as a dance, not a wrestling match. It's about rhythm, not domination. You step forward, they step forward. You lean back, they lean in. Now let me introduce another critical element, timing. You don't send this message 60 seconds after being ignored. You create space. You allow room for their thoughts to settle, for the absence to be felt. Then, when the moment is ripe, you deliver those calibrated words. So here is my challenge to you. The next time you're met with silence, resist the panic, reject the chase, decline the collapse. Instead, lean back. Sometimes the most powerful reply is crafted from the confidence to not reply at all. Smile inwardly and deploy that strategic phrase. Then observe, because true communication isn't about volume. It's about being the echo someone can't quiet in their own mind. But let's dig deeper. Why does that unread status trigger such a visceral sting? Why does digital silence feel like a miniature rejection? The answer is embedded in our very wiring. From infancy, we are neurologically programmed to seek connection, validation, and acknowledgement. We rely on signals, a smile, eye contact, a nod to confirm we are seen, safe, and valued. When those signals are absent, when someone chooses silence over response, it doesn't just register as a communication gap. It feels like a rupture in connection itself. And connection is a non-negotiable human need. Here's the fascinating part. When someone doesn't reply, your brain doesn't simply move on. It launches an internal investigation. It tries to fill the void. Was it something I said? Are they upset? Is this intentional disregard? The longer the silence lingers, the louder these questions become. Psychologists call this a cognitive gap. Our minds despise uncertainty. They crave resolution. If they can't get a real answer, they'll invent one. That's why you find yourself overanalyzing every word, every emoji, every punctuation mark. But here's the pivotal twist. This exact same psychological mechanism operates within them. Consider this. When you don't reply to someone awaiting your answer, what transpires? Their brain also kicks into overdrive. Their curiosity spikes. They become preoccupied with deciphering your silence. This is the psychological dynamic you must comprehend to communicate with power and precision. However, let's pause here because there's a more profound layer. Human psychology isn't just about reaction, it's about perception. People don't just respond to your words, they respond to the emotional landscape those words create. When you send a follow-up after being ignored, your message broadcasts either confidence or desperation. And let me be clear, people can detect desperation from a continent away. Desperation repels. Confidence, conversely, attracts. For example, hey, just checking if you saw my text, communicates anxiety and a fear of being overlooked. But if you instead respond with something that ignites curiosity, that's an unexpected turn. You've rewritten the script. You're not chasing, you're artfully drawing them back into the dialogue. Why? Because now they're the ones sitting with uncertainty. And uncertainty, when paired with genuine curiosity, is an incredibly potent combination. The objective in communication isn't to secure an instant reply every single time. The objective is to preserve your intrinsic sense of self-worth and value, even amid silence. When someone doesn't reply, it isn't always a commentary on you. They could be preoccupied, distracted, or simply processing. But when you react emotionally, when you fire off frantic follow-ups, you're allowing their silence to dictate your emotional weather. That isn't power. That's a surrender of power. Now let's flip the perspective. Imagine you send a message and receive no reply. Instead of an emotional reaction, you respond with strategy. You understand the psychology at play. You know that silence creates tension, and you know how to harness that tension. Perhaps you wait. Perhaps you leave a subtle, intriguing follow-up that sparks curiosity. Whatever your choice, it originates from a place of control, not reactivity. That, my friends, is emotional intelligence in motion. So, what's the ultimate takeaway? Human psychology operates on patterns, triggers, and responses. We are drawn to what feels slightly elusive. We want what we can't fully grasp. When you understand that dynamic, you stop chasing people for their attention. Instead, you earn it, you invite it, and most critically, you command it. Not through volume, but through the quiet power of understanding how the human mind works. In the end, communication isn't just about what you say. It's about how you make the other person feel. Master that, and you won't just get more replies. You'll forge connections rooted in mutual respect, curiosity, and authentic value. That is the power of psychological insight. That is how you transmute silence into strategy. Let me share something profound with you. Humans are irresistibly drawn to mystery. We can't help it. It exerts a gravitational pull on our attention. The moment something feels uncertain or ambiguous, our brains switch to detective mode. We ask questions, analyze clues, and strive to bridge the gap between the known and the unknown. In communication, especially when someone hasn't replied to your message, mystery becomes one of your most formidable tools. Why does mystery work so powerfully? Because it activates the Zeigarnik effect, a psychological principle stating our minds remember incomplete tasks and unresolved situations more vividly than finished ones. When you leave something open-ended, when you spark curiosity without immediately satisfying it, you create a mental itch in the other person, an itch that demands to be scratched. Think about cliffhangers in stories. Why do they keep you coming back? Because the narrative is unresolved. You need to know what happens next. This exact principle applies to your messages. When someone doesn't reply, most people err by over-explaining or over-pursuing. They write paragraphs, they plead, they apologize unnecessarily. But what happens when you do that? You close the loop, you eliminate the mystery, you provide all the answers, and their brain no longer needs to ponder you. You become predictable, and predictability is the nemesis of curiosity. Instead, if you send something brief, slightly enigmatic, something that doesn't offer full resolution, you flip the power dynamic. Now they're the ones wondering, what did they mean by that? Are they upset? Are they perfectly fine without me? Did I miss something? Let me offer an example. Imagine you send a text and receive no reply. Hours, maybe days pass. Instead of a needy, "Hey, did you see my message?" you drop something simple yet intriguing. "Fascinating. That wasn't the response I anticipated." Or "Noted." These are short, laden with implication, and crucially, they leave space. Space for the other person to wonder. Space for their mind to start filling in the blanks. And you know what happens? They start thinking about you. You become the unfinished task in their mental inbox. You become the cliffhanger they feel compelled to resolve. But here's the vital distinction. You cannot counterfeit this. You can't just copy-paste a mysterious message and expect consistent results. It must emanate from authentic self-assuredness. Mystery works when it's paired with genuine confidence. If you're using mystery as a tactic while internally desperate for their reply, they will sense it. People are remarkably adept at detecting emotional incongruence. Therefore, your mindset is paramount. When you employ mystery, you must be at peace with any outcome, whether they reply or not. You remain centered, focused, and confident in your own inherent value. In communication, particularly digital conversation, people don't just respond to your words, they respond to the energy behind them. Mystery carries a specific energy. It feels confident, it feels intentional, it feels slightly out of reach. And what happens when something feels just out of reach? The desire to reach for it intensifies. Consider luxury brands. Why are they coveted? It's not solely about product quality, it's about perceived exclusivity. And exclusivity is rooted in mystery. However, and this is key, you must know when to stop. Mystery works because it leaves room for curiosity. If you follow a mysterious message with 5 clarifying texts, you assassinate the effect. You must master the art of sending a single, sharp, intriguing follow-up, and then waiting without anxiety, waiting without second-guessing, waiting because you trust the seed has been planted, and now it's their turn to water it. At its core, mystery is about creating deliberate space. It's about intentionally leaving gaps so the other person feels compelled to fill them. When you master this skill, you'll notice something remarkable. People begin leaning into conversations with you. They start chasing your clarity. Most importantly, they start valuing your communication because it feels different, deliberate, intentional, and magnetic. So, the next time someone doesn't reply, don't fill the silence with noise. Instead, deposit a carefully crafted message that ignites curiosity. Then, lean back, smile, and allow human psychology to perform its magic. Because mystery isn't about being unclear, it's about being intriguing. Master that, and you won't just receive more replies, you'll command more attention. And attention, my friends, is the currency of genuine connection. Let me ask you this. When you send a message and get no reply, what's the default narrative most people construct? It's to chase, to follow up, to seek closure. At its heart, this reaction springs from a fundamental human need to feel seen, to feel acknowledged. But here's the difficult truth. The moment you initiate the chase, you relinquish power. Because chasing communicates one thing with deafening clarity. You value their validation more than your own self-respect. And that, my friends, is treacherous territory. In every interaction, personal, professional, romantic, an invisible negotiation is underway. That negotiation isn't just about words, it's about perceived value. When someone doesn't reply, their silence creates a vacuum. In that vacuum, you have two choices. You can fill it with neediness, or you can fill it with value. Most people miss this. Every follow-up message you send transmits a silent meta message about your self-perception. Are you saying, I need your response to feel okay about myself? Or are you saying, I value myself and I choose to engage with people who respect my time and energy? Whether you realize it or not, the other person senses that energy. Let me tell you, value isn't loud. It's calm, it's composed, it doesn't beg, and it doesn't chase. Consider the most magnetic people you know. Are they the ones constantly seeking attention, asking for validation, reminding you of their presence? No. They're the ones who seem comfortable in their own skin. They communicate with intention and step back with confidence. Here's the kicker. They don't chase because they know their worth isn't contingent on someone else's response. Now let's examine the psychology. When you chase someone's attention, you trigger a specific brain response called reactance. Reactance occurs when someone feels their freedom of choice is being restricted. When you chase, you unintentionally apply pressure to respond, and their natural reaction is often to pull away further. Conversely, when you communicate with calm confidence and inherent value, you trigger a completely different response, invitation instead of pressure. Here's a practical example. You send a message, there's no reply. Instead of, hey, just checking if you saw my message, which screams uncertainty. You could say, no worries if you're tied up. Let me know when you're free to connect. That message communicates value. It says, I respect your time and I also respect mine. That subtle shift changes everything. But value isn't just about words, it's about action. If someone consistently fails to offer you the energy or respect you deserve, sometimes the most valuable action is to step back. Not in anger, not in spite, but in self-respect. Because stepping back doesn't just send a message to them, it sends a message to you. It reinforces your own sense of worth. It reminds you that your value isn't dictated by someone else's acknowledgement. I want to be unequivocally clear. This isn't about game playing. It's not about being cold or manipulative. It's about being centered. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't up for negotiation. When you communicate from a place of value, you're declaring, I know what I bring to the table, and I'm not afraid to eat alone if necessary. That mindset is magnetic. People are naturally drawn to those who carry themselves with confidence and self-respect. Why? Because value is inherently attractive. When you value yourself, you establish a standard. And here's the beautiful thing about standards. They don't require explanation. They're felt. They're understood. People either rise to meet them or they don't. Either way, you win. Let's synthesize this. Every message you send is an opportunity to communicate not just information, but energy. Are you broadcasting value or desperation? Are you fortifying your self-worth or outsourcing it to someone else's reply? These are the questions you must ask yourself, because the moment you begin showing up in your communication with a sense of inherent value and self-respect, everything transforms. So, the next time someone doesn't reply, don't react from fear. Respond from value. Maybe you follow up with a confident, concise message. Maybe you step back entirely. Whatever you choose, do it with intention. Do it with clarity. And most importantly, do it with the unshakable knowledge that your worth isn't tethered to their response. Because value doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, it doesn't crumble in silence. Value stands tall. Embody that, and people won't just reply. They'll respect you in ways you've never experienced. That is the power of leading with value. That is the secret to shifting the dynamic in every interaction you have. Have you ever felt like you were carrying the entire weight of a conversation? Like you were the only one investing energy, time, and thought to keep a connection alive? It's exhausting because communication, at its essence, is meant to be a two-way street. It's not designed to be one-sided. When one person consistently shows up while the other remains silent or non-committal, an imbalance forms. And here's the truth. When imbalance becomes the norm, respect begins to erode. Both their respect for you and your respect for yourself. Every time you communicate, an unspoken agreement is in play. It says, I'll give you my time, energy, and attention, and I trust you'll value it enough to reciprocate. But when someone stops upholding their end, when they cease replying, when they go silent without explanation, you face a choice. Do you continue pouring your energy into an empty vessel? Or do you recognize that communication isn't just about effort, it's about balance? Here's where most people err. They double down. They chase harder. They send more messages, longer messages, overly polite follow-ups, or even guilt trips. I guess you're too busy for me. While these reactions are human, stemming from a desire for clarity and connection, they're also counterproductive. Why? Because they create a dynamic where one person is overfunctioning and the other is underfunctioning. And relationships of any kind cannot thrive in such imbalance. Communication is like a dance. There's a rhythm. One person steps forward, the other steps back, then they switch. But if one person keeps lunging forward while the other remains motionless, it stops being a dance. It becomes a chase. And here's the uncomfortable reality. People are rarely drawn to the one doing all the chasing. Why? Because chasing communicates scarcity. It signals you value their attention more than they value yours. In that dynamic, respect inevitably fades. But let's pause. I need you to understand something deeply. Stepping back isn't about punishing the other person. It's not about game playing or manipulation. It's about self-respect. It's about recognizing that your time, energy, and presence are valuable. If someone isn't showing up to meet you halfway, it is not your responsibility to carry them the rest of the way. Here's the reality. When someone values your presence, they'll demonstrate it. When someone respects your time, they'll protect it. When someone cares about communicating with you, they'll make the effort. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, but what if they're just busy? What if there's a valid reason? Sure, life happens, people get overwhelmed, but, and this is crucial, busy is not synonymous with disinterested. A person who values you will find a moment, even on their busiest day, to say, hey, I saw your message, I'll circle back when I can. It's not about endless availability. It's about demonstrating basic respect. If someone cannot offer even that, it is not your job to keep justifying their silence. Communication is also about boundaries. Boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about establishing expectations for yourself. They're about declaring, I will show up fully and authentically, but I will not keep pouring into a space that doesn't pour back. Boundaries aren't walls. They're filters. They filter out those who cannot meet you at your level, making space for those who can. So what do you do when someone doesn't reply? You step back. You resist the urge to fill the silence with noise. You let the space breathe, and you remind yourself of this truth. Someone else's inconsistency is not a reflection of your worth. Their silence is not an invitation for you to prove your value. In fact, sometimes the most powerful message you can send is no message at all. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because when you step back, you create space for clarity. You allow the other person to make a choice. Will they lean in or will they step away? Either way, you receive your answer. Ultimately, communication isn't just about words. It's about reciprocity. It's about two people showing up with intention, curiosity, and mutual respect. When that reciprocity is absent, your role isn't to chase. It's to step back, stand tall, and trust that the right people will match your energy. The people who truly value your presence won't need reminders to show up. They'll simply show up. So the next time you feel yourself slipping into the chasing role, pause, breathe. Remind yourself, communication is a two-way street. If someone isn't walking towards you, you are allowed to stop walking toward them. Not with bitterness, not with frustration, but with the quiet confidence that your time, energy, and presence deserve to be met with the same respect you offer. Operate from that place, and you will begin attracting people who genuinely value what you bring to the table. Let me share an insight with you. Silence is one of the most powerful instruments in communication, yet most people don't know how to wield it. In fact, most fear it. The moment there's a pause, an unanswered message, or an unreturned call, they rush to fill the void with more words, more texts, more explanations, more justifications. But here's the truth. Silence isn't empty. Silence is a space, and within that space resides immense power. When someone doesn't reply, your instinct might be to follow up immediately, to demand clarity, to seek closure, to feel seen. But what if your intentional silence could speak louder than any message? Silence creates contrast. It creates a vacuum. And here's the key. People notice what's missing. When you stop chasing, when you cease filling the air with noise, the other person feels the absence of your presence. That absence can be far more impactful than any cleverly crafted text. Think of it this way. When you're constantly available, constantly over-explaining, constantly showing up, even when someone isn't reciprocating, you become like background noise. Predictable, expected. But when you pull back, when you let silence communicate, you shift the energy. Suddenly you're not predictable anymore. Suddenly there's a question mark hanging in the air. And questions, my friends, are far more powerful than answers. Questions make people think. Questions make people feel. But silence isn't just a tool for the other person. It's also a tool for you. It creates space for you to pause, to reflect, to ask yourself, why am I chasing someone who isn't meeting me halfway? Why do I feel compelled to fill this gap with endless words? What does this silence actually reveal about this relationship or dynamic? Because silence is also a mirror. It shows you where your insecurities lie, where your fears reside, and where you might be outsourcing your sense of worth to another's validation. Let me tell you this, people respect intentional silence because silence isn't passive, it's active, it's a choice. It's you declaring, I won't beg for your attention, I won't chase your response, I'll allow this space to exist. If you choose to step into it, you're welcome, but I won't force it. That kind of silence carries weight, it carries presence, and presence is magnetic. Holding silence isn't easy. It can feel uncomfortable, vulnerable. It can trigger every insecurity about being ignored or undervalued. And that's precisely why it's so powerful. Because when you learn to sit in that silence, to own it, you're no longer reacting from fear. You're acting from strength. You're sending a message without uttering a word. I value myself enough to let this space breathe. Most people underestimate the power of absence. They think if they're not constantly present, they'll be forgotten. But the opposite is often true. When someone notices your absence, when they feel the shift in energy, it forces them to pause and reflect. They start asking, why haven't they followed up? Did I miss something? Are they upset? Are they moving on? Just like that, you've shifted the power dynamic, not through manipulation, but through self-respect. Crucially, silence isn't about punishment. It's not about making someone feel guilty. It's about setting a boundary. It's about stating, I'm willing to communicate, but I'm not willing to beg. I'm willing to invest energy, but I'm not willing to waste it. That isn't cold. It's confident. That isn't distant. It's deliberate. But silence only works if you trust it. If you break it too soon with anxious follow-ups, you dilute its potency. Silence needs time to create impact. It's like planting a seed. You don't dig it up every few minutes to check for growth. You plant it, you trust the process. The same applies here. So, the next time someone doesn't reply, instead of sending multiple messages to fill the gap, lean into the silence. Hold it, own it, trust it. Because sometimes the most profound message you can send isn't a message at all. It's the space between messages. It's the pause. It's the stillness. And here's the beautiful part. People who value you, who respect you, who truly see you, they'll notice your silence. They'll feel it and they'll respond. And if they don't, that silence also gave you clarity. It showed you exactly where you stand. And clarity, my friends, is priceless. Let silence do its work. Trust it. Honor it. Because in a world saturated with noise, silence speaks volumes. Let me ask you, when someone doesn't reply, what narrative do you construct? Because whether you're aware of it or not, you're always telling yourself a story. Perhaps it's, they're ignoring me because I'm not important, or they must not care, or I must have said something wrong. Here's the truth. You don't have all the information, yet your brain, wired to avoid discomfort, rushes to fill those gaps with stories. These narratives, however, are rarely true. They're fear-based, built on insecurities and past wounds. The danger isn't just their falseness, it's that we believe them, internalize them, and then communicate from that place of fear. And fear-based communication never fosters connection. It creates distance. Let's get practical. When you don't get a reply, your brain will want to jump to conclusions. It's natural. But what if instead of defaulting to the worst-case scenario, you paused and asked, what else could this mean? The reality is there are countless reasons someone might not reply. They could be busy. They might have seen your message at an inopportune time. They may have intended to reply but got distracted. Or, and this is vital, it may have nothing to do with you at all. Not every silence is a verdict on your worth. Sometimes it's simply a reflection of their life, their priorities, or their communication style. When you realize that someone else's actions or inactions don't have to define your self-worth, you reclaim your power. You stop giving them control over your emotional state. This doesn't mean ignoring patterns. If someone consistently leaves you hanging, that's data, not just a story. Data helps you make decisions, set boundaries, and determine if a connection merits your continued investment. Understand this, your emotional state doesn't have to be hostage to someone else's inconsistency. You have the power to step back, to pause, and to ask, what story am I telling myself right now? Is it serving me? The stories we tell ourselves aren't mere thoughts. They're blueprints. They shape our actions, our feelings, and how we show up in relationships. Now flip the script. Imagine someone doesn't reply. Instead of spiraling, you pause, you breathe, you remind yourself their silence isn't about me. I am still valuable. I am still worthy. I control how I respond. That shift is monumental. When you stop reacting emotionally to inconsistency, you gain clarity. Clarity leads to better decisions, healthier boundaries, and stronger relationships. Why does this matter so deeply? Because how you handle these moments isn't just about them. It's about you. It's about your relationship with yourself. Every time you catch yourself spiraling into self-blame or clinging to a negative narrative, you have an opportunity to rewrite that story. You have an opportunity to reaffirm your worth, independent of anyone else's behavior. Here's the beautiful consequence. People sense that shift in you. When you're no longer seeking validation in their replies, when you're no longer operating from fear, your entire energy transforms. You become more confident, more centered, more magnetic, and people are drawn to that energy. They respect it. They respond to it. This isn't merely about attracting others. It's about you. The relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship. If your self-worth is tethered to someone else's replies, you're building on unstable ground. But when you can stand firm, knowing your value doesn't diminish in silence, you become unshakable. So, here's my challenge. The next time someone doesn't reply, notice the story you're telling yourself. Ask, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this the story I choose to believe? If the answer is no, rewrite it. Replace it with a story that empowers you. Because your mind is always listening, and the narrative you choose shapes the reality you experience. In the end, remember this. Someone else's inconsistency doesn't define you. Their silence doesn't diminish your worth. Your value isn't something given or taken away. It's something you carry within. Own that. Trust that. And watch as your world begins to transform when you stop letting someone else's silence author your story. Ultimately, communication transcends mere words. It's about respect, reciprocity, and healthy boundaries. When met with silence, it's easy to fall into the traps of chasing, over-explaining, or constructing narratives that erode self-worth. But here's the truth. Silence isn't always a reflection of your value. Often, it's a reflection of the other person's priorities, mindset, or circumstances. Your power resides in your response to that silence. Remember, your time, energy, and attention are valuable currencies. Don't devalue them by giving them freely to those unwilling to meet you halfway. Sometimes the most potent message is no message, a strategic step back that lets space speak louder than words. This isn't game playing, it's self-respect. It's knowing when to lean in and when to release, understanding that clarity often emerges in stillness, and that your worth remains intact regardless of another's acknowledgement. How you conduct yourself in uncertainty sets the tone for future interactions. So, as you move forward, remember, don't chase, don't beg, don't fill silence from a place of fear. Instead, pause, reflect, and most importantly, trust. Trust that those who value you will show up. Trust that your worth isn't determined by someone else's response. Trust that sometimes stepping back isn't losing, it's leading with confidence. The people who truly see your value won't need reminders to meet you where you stand. In a noisy world, let your presence and sometimes your deliberate silence speak for itself. When you own your space and honor your worth, you won't need to chase anyone. The right people will naturally find their way to you. If this perspective resonates and empowers you, please support this channel by liking this video and subscribing to Tony Robbins Speak.